يسعدني ويسرني باسم معالي الدكتور علي راشد النعيمي أن رئيس المجلس العالمي للمجتمعات المسلمة أن نفتتح هذه الندوة الدولية التي تحاول من خلال قراءة هجرات المسلمين في هذا المحيط الهندي وما قدموه عبر التاريخ من خدمات ومن نقلهم للتجارب الإنسانية وصقلها مع التجارب الأخرى من حمولة ثقافية وفكرية وحضارية بل وبرؤى قد تختلف عن هذه البلدان الجديدة. كيف استطاع المسلمون وهم يهاجرون من أوطانهم الأصلية إلى هذه البلدان كيف كانوا ولا زالوا عنصرا أساسيا في التبادل والتعايش بين مختلف المكونات الدينية والعرقية. الهجرة شيء جميل، والهجرة فعل حضاري دائما كان عبر امتداد الأزمنة والعصور والأمكنة، استطاع أن ينقل معه من خلال هذه التبادلات التي كانت ولا تزال بين أقطار وبين دول، أنها يمكن لها أن تحدث شيء جميل وهو التعايش السلمي بين كل هذه المكونات الدينية والثقافية، وفي نفس الوقت هو نقل الخبرات ونقل العقول المهاجرة والكفاءات العلمية من أجل أن يستفيد منها في الأخير الإنسان. المسلمون في منطقة المحيط الهندي نقلوا كذلك شيئا آخر، وهو إيجاد آليات جديدة في الفعل البحث الشرعي. مثلا نجد أن المذهب الشافعي كيف انتشر وكيف صاغ منظومة حياتية أخذت باتصال بالأصل اللي هو الكتاب والسنة والإجماع، وانفتاحها على محيطها الثقافي وبلورة فقه جديد يتناسب ويتلائم مع هذه المجتمعات ومع هذه الدول الجديدة. نرحب بكم باسم المجلس العالمي للمجتمعات المسلمة وباسم رئيسه المعالي الدكتور علي راشد النعيمي. نرحب بكل الإخوة والأخوات المشاركين سواء في الندوة أو المتابعين لنا من خلال وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي.
رحيم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. His Excellency Dr. Ali Rashid Al-Nuaimi, Honorable Mrs. Halima Alima Dawood, respected speakers and participants, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Good afternoon and welcome to the international webinar on Muslim immigrants and citizenship across the Indian Ocean world, organized by the World Muslim Communities Council. Alhamdulillah, today we are gathered together to listen and learn from the sharings of our great speakers hailing internationally from nations surrounding the Indian Ocean. You might be wondering why the Indian Ocean and how significant is this area to the Muslim world. For that, let me give you a brief introduction or background to this webinar. Migration or hijrah for Muslims have profound importance in preserving the Islamic faith and searching for the well-being in the new home. Throughout history, Muslim migration has fostered new expressions of national identities and established multicultural, multiracial, and multi-ethnic communities worldwide. History of Muslim immigration across the Indian Ocean world immediately after the emergence of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula and lasted until today provided a vivid and instructive case of how the indigenization of Islam and the creation of new citizenship has reshaped the population from East Africa to Southeast Asia. Muslim traders, travelers, missionaries, slaves, laborers, revolutionaries, and even refugees willingly or otherwise sailed across the Indian Ocean and sought a new frontier or a better place to settle down. Today, these immigrants have established vibrant Muslim communities and institutions, passed down Islamic heritage, and celebrated their citizenship in the recent nation state since World War II. The story and examples of the Muslim immigrants are worth highlighting today to understand Islamic indigenization, integration, and citizenship in newly established communities elsewhere and achieve harmonious society. We hope that through this webinar, we will be acquainted with the models and lessons of community building from each community, with hopes that it inspires today Muslims to instill citizenship by strengthening national and cultural identities while continuing to preserve Islamic belief and traditions in this ever-globalized world. My name is Lina Salim, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. And to begin, I will now call upon His Excellency Dr. Ali Rashid Al-Nuaimi, Chairman of the World Muslim Communities Council, to deliver the opening speech. فليتفضل مشكورا. Please wait for a while we check whether Dr. Ali Al-Nuaimi is with us already.
Yeah, can you move to the next minister? I think Dr. Ali is not joined yet, so we can start with the minister.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Inshallah, when he arrives, we will get him to do the opening speech. But for now, let us move to the next person. So I will now call upon Honorable Mrs. Halima Alima Dawood, the Member of Parliament, Deputy Minister of Local Government of Malawi, to deliver the keynote speech. Madam Halima, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All perfect praise and thanks be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayers and blessings be upon his final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, loved ones and all believing men and women. Respected brothers and sisters, I'm honored to be part of this webinar to share my insights. The theme of this meeting is Muslim migrants, immigrants, and citizenship across the Indian Ocean world. This is a topic of very importance, especially now when migration is at the peak and ideologies are at loggerheads, compounded by the flow of information, which is at a pace that is radically increasing with the advent and growth of many media platforms. Today, we find ourselves as an Ummah having a sensitive responsibility of safeguarding the identity of this beautiful way of life, and at the same time, required to load and lead exemplary as models of life to be emulated by others, civilizations, and most importantly, our children for the next generation. It is not worthy to commend the great institutions all around the globe that have made strides in such areas. The likes of the World Muslim Communities Council on a global scale and the likes of the Cordoba Foundation, the Muslim Debate Initiative, and Muslim associations on national levels are the examples of Muslim immigrants active in civic participation and preserving the Islamic heritage, and equally, bodies that are firmly established in facilitating this principle. The first narration we find in the book of Bukhari is one where Allah's messenger tells about intention. We get what immigration crucial sunnah, with which many education, dawah, wealth creation, refuge are some of the many outcomes we can consider as positive. This reality is in tandem with vicious pursuits encouraged by our Nabi, such as his saying, and I quote, "I seek knowledge up to China," end of quote. The hijrah witnessed historically by the Salaf for Dawah, which is the cause for people outside Arabic Peninsula, like myself, to be followers of this deen, the economic diaspora across the globe, which today contribute economies of their communities, and the Muslim brothers and sisters that have sought asylum with nations across the globe. To take the example of Somali migration, these vicious pursuits are evident in each continent from this beautiful African community. A great number of people from this community that migrated today are well-renowned scholars with presence of impact in these prevailing media platforms. Halal foods, masjids are available to the communities of their newly found homes, and much more. As a collective human race, we have always been underpinned to social contracts. Historically, in pre-Islamic times, post-Islamic times, such as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the secular dispensation prevalent today, and most importantly, our life in relation to our Creator. These social contracts today shape the status of our individual identities and equally state our affairs, our citizenry, our rights as individual, and the same case, exclusive to Muslims and our community obligations. Scores of Muslim migrants today find themselves at a dichotomy between their social contracts with their Creator and their Islamic heritage against their newly adopted identity through citizenry of other civilizations and the prevalent cultural norms and manifestations in these other civilizations. It is worth highlighting that we are living in a world where human rights and civil tolerance are cornerstones of almost every modern jurisdiction on paper. Yet scores of Muslim communities around the globe find themselves victimized, marginalized, and prejudiced as communities. As such, we see that migration does come with its fair share of both positive and negative. However, this does not imply the absence of a silver lining, as was evident with the results of Hudaybiyah. The requirements of civil tolerance that was agreed upon that day only created an avenue for the beautiful truth of Islam to be manifested, whilst resulted in the growth of Islam. Equally today, civil tolerance is a prerequisite within the jurisdiction of a majority of the non-Muslim countries in which Muslims migrants experience the aforementioned vices, such as the fruits of Muslim migration are immeasurable. And however, today we see void that could be addressed through organizations at community level for Muslims within this kind of communities. Indeed, such organizations is a reality that is most, if only not only evident in part of the where the Islamic heritage migration from and not such, many Muslims are left to remaining with voids with. Therefore, global Muslim community, a requirement guards through collective and individual responsibility of all Muslims. And in summary, I thought it wise to emphasize much on the need to address this deficit in the migrant Muslim communities. So a prerequisite for preserving the Islamic heritage and a means of taking forward the positive contributions of our pious predecessors who migrated and in effect affected the status of our heritage as it is today. I hope my emphasis on this will suffice as insightful to the organizers of this webinar, as well as the rest of my brothers and sisters. With these few words, let me thank the organizing community for according me this opportunity to be part of this webinar. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant everyone the best from this, and to it, let be of benefit to us and others. Ameen. And assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you, Madam Halima, for the very insightful speech. It is very important to not just celebrate the migration effort of our predecessors and learn from their footsteps, but also I applaud you for highlighting what are the deficits that continue to face the Muslim communities worldwide through the discrimination and stereotypes that they continue to face due to their migration status. And with that, let us now open the floor to our great line of speakers who will each contribute by sharing their experiences hailing from their own community. And with that, let me call upon the first speaker in line. We have Dr. Habib Muhammad Jamal. He's the president of Queensland Muslim Incorporation, Australia. So I will now pass the floor to Dr. Habib to deliver his speech. Dr. Habib, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon us all, and our greetings to our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Firstly, just let me put the record straight. I'm not a doctor. I'm just an ordinary person, community worker. My background, I was born in South Africa, and I migrated to New Zealand in 1989. And from New Zealand, we migrated to Australia in 1999, and we've been in Australia ever since. We live in the state of Queensland, and on the eastern side, not far from Brisbane, we live in a town called Gold Coast, a population of approximately 500,000 people. In terms of Muslim migration to Australia, the first Muslim interaction between Muslims and the indigenous people of Australia was in the early 1700s, when the Macassans or the Indonesian people used to trade with the Aboriginal people in the far north. And it is fairly well established that some of the practices of that group of indigenous people contain certain aspects of Muslim or Islamic culture. So, and having said that, the first batch of Afghani Cameliers or Indian Muslims came into Australia in around 1860, and the oldest mosque, it's not in use, is in a place in South Australia, the state, in a place called Marie, which was completed in 1882. It was just a, thatched roof premises where the Cameliers used to pray. And the contribution by the Cameliers is extremely important in that they were primarily responsible for opening the railroad between the north and the south of Australia across the desert in the middle of Australia. And since then, Islam has grown steadily, and it is one of the fastest growing religions, not only in the world, but in Australia as well. In the state that I live in, Queensland, our oldest mosque, which is in Holland Park, is 114 years old. So we are very well established. We have in the whole country around 25 Islamic schools, primary schools and high schools. There are also university courses in Islam offered at some of the universities. Our population makes up just on 2% of the total Australian population. But our contribution in terms of charity, in terms of taking part in various activities across the government, is quite massive in terms of the number of people we represent. In fact, in this year's national election, we have 3 Muslims who are members of parliament, and that's the first time in the history of Australia. So we are being recognized. Prior to 9/11, to be honest, prior to 9/11, nobody really bothered about who was a Muslim or who was not. But since 9/11, the last 21 years has been extremely difficult for Muslims. More especially difficult for our sisters because they are so easily recognizable because most of them wear the hijab. So there was a lot of racism, a lot of abuse, threats, graffiti on attacking the mosques, attacking school children, you name it, and we lived through it. And a lot of that changed in 2019 when, if you recall, I don't know if people know about the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand. And to me, that was a turning point in that after that, I was, not only me, but community leaders, our imams, our scholars, many of us invited all over the country to give talks on Islam and what is our true belief and what is our stand against terrorism, etc. So I think in Australia, the last 3 years or so has been much more easier, much more understanding, lots of interaction between various religious groups. I'm Vice President of the Queensland Federation of Communities Council. So that's made up of about 10 different religious organizations, Queensland Faith Communities Council, sorry. So that's made up of about 10 different religious organizations, and it's still growing. We also involved in a number of multicultural activities. Please remind me of the time. I'm not sure how long I got to go. So yes, Islam is progressing. It's progressing rapidly. We have a number of mosques. We have a number of madrasas that happens every day for school-age going children. But we also starting to have problems. Problems in terms of there is drug abuse, there is alcohol abuse, there is a number of intermarriages in between Muslims and non-Muslims. So these are some of the things that as community leaders, we have to see how we can, get our youth back, get them more involved in the mosque. And now authorities in the mosque are thinking they have to provide facilities for the youth. They have to somehow keep the youth occupied around the mosque areas so that, they can participate and be involved. We also found that in the past, a number of our imams were basically had qualified from studied overseas. So you know, they brought a brand of Islam that was not fully sort of acceptable or easily understood in Australia, because now you have the population, which is the greater part is born here. You know, 62% are under the age of 25. So it means that, you know, these are local Muslims. And on the positive note, we have on a regular basis, I live on the Gold Coast, our Muslim population is around, say, 700,000. But we, on average, we'll have at least 5 Australian people reverting or converting to Islam just in our mosque. So, you know, every time something bad happens, we somehow get an upsurge. A month or so later, we'll get an upsurge in the number of people inquiring about Islam and the number accepting Islam. We've also encouraged a lot of school visits. So high school students from grade 6 upwards, they visit the mosque to as part of the religious education. I'm talking about non-Muslim school students. Visit the mosque and we give them talks on basically what Islam is all about. We also get many university students like nurses and trainee doctors and things wanting to know how to treat patients, what's so different about treating male patients and female patients, and what our preferences are. They want to know a lot about halal foods. We have financial institutions in Australia that are providing Islamic finance. Just recently, less than 2 weeks ago, we had another organization that will be a fully fledged bank in 2024. So lots of progress being done, alhamdulillah, and that's only through the blessings of Almighty Allah. So yeah, and at the moment, coming into Australia as a migrant is relatively easy compared to the past, because we have a massive shortage of skilled labor. So if people are qualified and they fulfill certain age brackets and fulfill the point system and things, it is extremely easy to come into the country as a migrant. So, you know, hopefully if more Muslims take up that challenge and come, although we have a number, we used to get initially from Saudi Arabia, lots of students. This was before 2017. Lots of students used to come and study. Even in Gold Coast, we have 3 university campuses. They used to come and study a postgraduate and then go back to Saudi. And also from the UAE, we used to get a number of students. Somehow that has dropped away. We get a lot of Malaysian, Indonesian, and Indian students now coming into Australia to study. So I'm not sure what the reason for the Middle Eastern drop has been, but you know, they're still very welcome. And yes, our females dress in the hijab, most of them. A lot of them are now getting employment in government departments, in the hospitals, in the schools. We are being more accepted. So again, that is by the grace of Allah. So, you know, to the organizers, thank you very much for having me, for having some input. Hopefully I get more notice next time so I can prepare better. But I already got informed this. It's now 8:30 exactly our time, 8:30 p.m. Sunday night. So inshallah, next time will be better off. Jazakallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would still call you Dr. Habib. Thank you so much for your sharing. It has been really interesting to hear how Islam has came to Australia, and the communities, the Muslim communities in Australia are very much connected with other Muslim communities worldwide. Thank you so much for sharing about the situation there. To note, I also was informed of Islam in Australia through a Netflix show that I watched called The Mosque Next Door, featuring the Muslim communities in Brisbane. That's a very eye-opening show that we could actually see up uploaded on a mainstream platform in Netflix. Okay, now I will now pass the floor to our next speaker, which is Maulana Ibrahim Ismail Bam, the General Secretary of the Council of Muslim Theologians from Johannesburg, South Africa. Maulana Ibrahim, please.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم. Beginning by praising the Almighty and sending salutations upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the messengers of the Almighty and those who follow them in righteousness and guidance. It gives me great pleasure as the Secretary General of the Council of Muslim Theologians in South Africa to be participating in this webinar on Muslim immigrants and citizenships across the Indian Ocean. We who are here in the southern tip of Africa, in South Africa, have had various streams of migration across the Indian Ocean. And the most historically, the first that happened was some 370 years ago from the Indonesian archipelago, Malabar and Makassar, places like that, where they came to the Cape Province. They were forced into labor and they were forced into incarceration. And they were in Robben Island, and it became a place of political exiles way before it became famous for the incarceration of Nelson Mandela. Amongst the people who were most prominent in those were great figures like Imam Tuan Guru and Imam and Sheikh Yusuf from Makassar. In 1860 saw another stream of migration that came from the east coast of India, mainly from the Gujarat region and the Malabar coast, and even from other parts of India. They came in 1860 as indentured laborers. They were brought in by the British, who were in then control over South Africa. They came in as sugarcane planters, and they came in mostly in Natal, and then they made their way into the Transvaal province, as it was known at that time. There was, of course, another migration that happened after 1994, which added to the tapestry of the Muslim community in South Africa. And those were people who came in after 1994, when democracy reigned in South Africa and Nelson Mandela led the ANC into power. At that time, many people and migrants that came from Indo-Pak, Bangladesh, and even other parts of Africa that settled into South Africa. Now, those communities that came in, they took various steps and in preserving their traditions and identity. For example, we know that there has been communal recitation of the Holy Quran and zikr, more so in the Cape region, which was a means of preserving the tradition and preserving identity. Imam Tuan Guru and Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar wrote the Quran by memory with hand, which is still preserved in the Awal Masjid in Cape Town. Then, of course, together with that, they also settled and set up masjids, house of the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And together with that, adjacent to the masjids, there was always different type of infrastructure. Most notably amongst them, or what is known as the madrasa or the makatib system, which is educational facilities for the primary education of Muslim students, who normally after school come to these makatib or come to these madrasas with the intention of being well grounded in Islamic education. And South Africa has been a pioneer in this particular regard. The Muslims of South Africa has been a pioneer in this particular regard for this particular system of education known as the makatib system, where children come to these educational systems, in educational infrastructures, to learn about the primary education of Muslim theology, history, and learning of the Holy Quran, recitation and memorization of the Holy Quran, and essential du'as and prayers. Together with that, they've also set up various other infrastructure. So Muslims have been in the forefront of education and health. We have Muslims who have been in the forefront in South Africa, and Muslims have been quite visible. They have been visible in various vocations and various fields. So it is not uncommon in South Africa to find Muslims in the forefront of sports, Hashim Amla in cricket and many other disciplines of sports, in commerce, in economy, and also in social and political activism. So Muslims have played a very important role in the freedom of South Africa, or bringing democracy to South Africa. And therefore, it is well known that Ahmed Kathrada was incarcerated with Nelson Mandela in Robben Island. And Muslims have played a role, and their history and their role is well documented with regard to bringing democracy into South Africa. Post-democracy, we find Muslims have also played a role in political and civil activism, and in particular playing a role in alleviating the difficulties and challenges of poverty and especially unemployment. And amongst the various organizations, the one that is in the forefront is Waqful Waqifin, the gift of the givers, set up by Imtiaz Suleiman, who have achieved fame and who have achieved great amount of services and contribution, not only locally but abroad. And he is well respected for the type of initiatives that he brings to alleviate poverty and alleviating job and unemployment crisis that is hitting South Africa. Then of course we have other very prominent Muslim organizations in the forefront of political and civil activism. Muslims are also in the forefront of commerce and also in various other fields. There has been a policy, social policy development organization known as ASRI, the Oval Socio-Economic Research Institute. So in this particular regard, Muslims have been a very visible part of South Africa, and they continue to play their role. Yes, they have challenges, the challenges that are, akin, and the challenges that are equal to all South Africans, whether it be with regard to unemployment, whether it be with regard to poverty, whether it be with regard to the lack of service delivery, which has been a very tragic part of South African scene post-1994, where in many ways the government has not been able to meet the expectations of the people since coming into power. Having said all of that, they also face other type of challenges, especially the ones who have come recently. They face the challenge of xenophobia. They face the challenge with regard to being singled out and being targeted and being looked upon as robbing South Africans of very much needed and valuable resources. All in all, they play a very important part and are very visible in South Africa. And of course, they can play the role that our beloved Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam played, which is a role model for Muslims who migrate. For when our beloved Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina Munawwara, he found a community and he found a society which were from different backgrounds, tribal backgrounds, religious backgrounds. You had the three Jewish communities. You had the Aus and the Khazraj. How the beloved Prophet of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created harmony between those groups. So he created the Pact of Medina, which was to create harmony and to be able to face the challenges facing the citizens of Medina collectively. Then he created a brotherhood between the people who came from Mecca, known as the Muhajirin, the refugees, and the Ansar, the supporters and the helpers, which was unique in the annals, not only of Islamic, but human history. And then of course he gave very beautiful commands to enhance that harmony. And Abdullah ibn Salam radiallahu ta'ala anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, says that he came to visit the Prophet after migration, and he heard him saying the very first words, which were so full of wisdom. Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, afshu salam, spread peace, spread salam, spread greetings, and atimut ta'am, feed people, wasilul arham, and strengthen the bonds of family relationship, and also do not forget your spiritual development, wasallu bil layli wan nasu niyam, and turn towards the Almighty in prayer while people are normally sleeping. Tadkhulul jannata bis salam, you will enter into paradise most peacefully. It was these type of beautiful sayings that brought the migrant community and the people of Medina living together in harmony, and that remains a very great inspiration and motivation for Muslims who migrate. May Allah Almighty give us the tawfiq of practicing. Thanking you. Jazakumullah.
Thank you so much. Such a lovely message that is given by Maulana Ibrahim Ismail Bam. It is timely for us to be remembered of our role model, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, may peace be upon him, and how he has managed to give us an exemplary model of how migrants and the locals can work together towards achieving community harmony between everyone. So now let me call upon our next speaker, Dr. Rodziana Muhammad Razali, the Senior Lecturer of Faculty of Law and Sharia from University Science Islam Malaysia, Malaysia. Madam Rodziana, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Moderator. Can I share my screen? Hold on, please. All right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very warm greeting from Malaysia. And it's a pleasure to be part of this important webinar today. I would like to record my deepest thanks to the organizer for this invitation. My research background is predominantly in the area of prevention of statelessness, especially childhood statelessness, and I'm currently a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Sharia and Law, Islamic Science University, Malaysia. All right, geographically, the focus of my short presentation today will be on Southeast Asia, in particular my own country, Malaysia, being one of the major recipients of migrants in this sub-region. So as we all know, Southeast Asia is characterized by complex mixed migration flows, which is the main migration pattern. And these flows are informed by or driven by political discrimination and conflict, and they are combined with factors such as lack of equal access to economic opportunities, and the second being the mixed composition of migrants. Occur when there's this malfunctioning of one channel of entry for migration, which actually prompts people to try and seek admission through some other channel or channels. So a little bit of facts and figures. Between 2018 and 2020, the government estimated that the country hosted approximately 1.4 to 2 million documented migrants, and about the same figures for other additional migrants, and some of these migrants are undocumented as well. And we therefore are the largest migrant receiving country in Southeast Asia. And these migrants are from our neighbors, mostly Indonesia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, and other countries in South Asia, as well as from countries like Cambodia and Laos, PDR. We also have refugees, about 180,000 of them. Some are registered and some others are not registered with the UNHCR. And the vast majority of them are from Myanmar, comprising the Rohingya predominantly, followed by Chin and other ethnic groups. And the rest are from Middle Eastern and North Africa. So My presentation today will center on the lack of progressive models of citizenship, by which I mean progressive transformation of nation-state institutions towards increasing inclusion and diversity, and including in Malaysia as a Muslim majority country, we have largely not adjusted ourselves enough to the migration patterns of modern times, including the mixed migration patterns that I have explained just now. Although we have seen a dynamic process of formulation of citizenship regimes in some countries. And some features of our exclusionary citizenship is that we are predominantly premised on jus sanguinis, which is citizenship by blood, but we have some features of conditional jus soli, but the stress is on jus sanguinis, and this could be problematic because jus sanguinis could be interpreted not purely by blood, but by legal relationship to your parents. So, for instance, citizenship will be problematic for children born out of wedlock. Yeah, and second, I argue specifically that the established causes of exclusionary citizenship frameworks in the region have their origin in nationality laws, policies, and/or practices that fail to honor the right to a nationality through direct or indirect discrimination on various legally prohibited grounds. And thirdly, the problem lies in the lack of pathways for integration due to the requirements of having to prove legal residence or parents' lawful immigration status. So this makes integration via formal citizenship frameworks, especially of the quote-unquote unwanted migrants among the low-skill, migrant workers, asylum seekers, and refugees, largely unattainable. I would like to move on to highlight the phenomenon of persons not recognized as citizens of any state, or the phenomenon of statelessness. In the sub-region, Myanmar and Thailand are known to be the two of the four largest stateless, hosting two of the four largest stateless populations in the world, and Malaysia and Brunei among the Muslim majority countries, alongside Vietnam and Cambodia, are other countries whose stateless persons number between 10,000 to 100,000 approximately. So statelessness is a product of exclusionary citizenship frameworks underpinned by discrimination, and this in turn triggers forced migration for some affected populations and massive inequalities via cycles of statelessness and lack of legal status, and consequently rights deprivation for many of them. And the populations that I would like to highlight as being stateless are Rohingya, and other than Rohingya, we have Bajau Laut, or the semi-migratory populations mostly found in northeastern Sabah in Malaysia, as well as other ethnic groups in Cambodia, and the hill tribe populations in Thailand. I would like to focus on the element of racial discrimination that affects the Rohingya. So if you look at the 1982 citizenship law in Myanmar, it is basically essentialized along ethnicity, and when the substance of the law, which is ethnic-centric and race discriminatory, is applied to certain minority groups, it then results in their arbitrary disqualification from being considered citizens. And Rohingya has this problem of proving the required evidence of their birthplace and nationality of their ancestors prior to the cutoff date that is underlined in the law, as well as the systematic discrimination and marginalization of this population by the junta. And we have seen their displacement in neighboring countries and countries outside the region. And the two major transit countries for Rohingya in this sub-region will be Malaysia as well as Bangladesh in Asia, and both countries have historically abandoned their unconditional use policies, right? And they lack the domestic refugee legal framework, which consequently means that the governments rely instead on their immigration laws to regulate these people. And in Malaysia, they lack legal status and access to rights such as formal education and right to formal employment. Gender discrimination in nationality laws, policies, and practices is another established source of statelessness. Brunei and Malaysia are the two Muslim majority countries in the sub-region that still apply gendered nationality laws. In Brunei, only fathers are allowed to confer nationality on their children, and this has affected children born of mixed marriages or those born outside the territory of their state. In Malaysia, we do actually guarantee gender equality in our federal constitution, but unfortunately, there are other contradictory provisions that still makes possible this situation of gender discrimination, whereby a Malaysian mother who is married to a non-citizen migrant is still unable to pass her nationality onto a child born abroad on an equal term with men. And we have seen a couple of court cases that have been specifically brought to challenge this inconsistent provision with this particular Article 8 that underlines gender equality. Although children born out of wedlock can actually trace, their birth to the country and their parental linkage to Malaysian parents, but citizenship could be problematic for them because our law says that if they're born out of wedlock, references to a person's father or to his parents in relation to a person who is illegitimate will be construed as references to the mother. And if the mother is undocumented, irregular, or doesn't have a confirmed citizenship status, the child could probably inherit that, and there is a risk of statelessness. The situations that I've just highlighted are those that fall within the ambit of direct discrimination, I would argue. But there are other administrative practices that would contribute to statelessness, and these are indirect practices. For instance, in our law, civil registration of birth is universal on paper, but for these unwanted migrants among the marginalized populations of refugees and stateless persons who lack legal status, approaching authorities to register birth and marriages, is something that they avoid for fear of immigration arrests, and they do have counters to report undocumented or irregular migrants when they approach the authorities for birth registration or sometimes for access to hospital treatment. And these are prevalent among the semi-nomadic migratory population in Sabah, Malaysia. So the result of this is that children grow up without having any proof to link them to any state, through birthplace, to link them to any parents, so that they have no record of birth certificates and they remained invisible. So in terms of tackling statelessness, I would say that countries like Malaysia do have existing safeguards against statelessness, but the interpretation of these safeguards is another matter altogether, because we have seen that even though, for instance, our federal constitution says that every person born within the federation who is not born a citizen of any country will be a citizen by operation of law, which means a strong, which constitutes a strong instrument to prevent statelessness. This has not been interpreted in an inclusive manner in the way that it should, in the way that I would say the legislators would have intended it to, to be. And we do have Article 15A that actually allows for special power, the special power of the federal government to register any person below the age of 21 under special circumstances. We should include statelessness, but this has been pretty much a discretionary tool. And in many cases, we have seen that children who are at risk of statelessness, who would otherwise be stateless, are not able to benefit from these two provisions. Given the scale of statelessness in Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, prevention alone will not suffice. And one solution is facilitating the acquisition of nationality through naturalization. And this is particularly important for cases of in situ statelessness or statelessness that affect long-term migrants who have been living in the same country for generations, where the only viable solution is the acquisition of the nationality of the country in which they have resided for many, many years. And this actually was possible at one time in Malaysia among Cham refugees who escaped the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia on the basis of religious and cultural similarity with the Malaysian Muslims, and whereby they were given the option of integration at one point of time. And also among the some of the Filipino refugees who fled southern Mindanao in the 1970s to 1980s. They were permitted to stay in Sabah and Labuan without limitation. But the political landscape has changed along with negative public sentiments against refugees, and this has prevented the option of integration of many other long-term forced migrants, including the Rohingya. Ultimately, legislative reform would offer the best solution in ensuring a uniform standard of laws that does not discriminate access to citizenship on discriminated grounds. Legal reform to promote equal right between men and women in the acquisition of and conferment of citizenship on their children have been undertaken in many countries, including in Middle East and North Africa, such as in Tunisia, Yemen, Kenya, Monaco, etc. The challenge is all these actions certainly require political will, long-term strategies, technical assistance, and the mobilization of a broader coalition of actors. And in a region where state sovereignty frequently prevails over international frameworks, collective efforts therefore need to be tailored to specific contexts of each country, engaging states' underlying concerns and sensitivities with respect to the issues of social inclusion, legal inclusion, and social inclusion of particular individuals and communities. With that, I thank you so much for your attention. Jazakallahu khairan katsira. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Roziana. I think your presentation is very much needed to bring the awareness of the current condition that migrant communities and refugees are facing in our part of the world. And may Allah help us in facilitating them into getting better treatment and hopefully citizenship, inshallah. Okay, so now I will now pass the floor to our next speaker. And he is Mr. Abu Fadl Muhsin Ibrahim. He is the scholar of Islamic Bioethic and Emeritus Professor of Islamic Studies, Seychelles, South Africa. Dr. Abu Fadl, may I call upon you to do your presentation now? Thank you.
Okay. I hope, can you see me? Is okay? Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Madam Rodiana, can you stop sharing so that we can see everyone? Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Abdul Fadil, we can all see you.
All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil mursaleen Sayyidina wa Nabiyina Maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Let me first begin by thanking the sponsors for having made this webinar on an important topic on in relation to migration and citizenship in the Indian Ocean. But since I come from Seychelles, then I will concentrate my talk on Seychelles. Now, let me begin by stating that the Indian Ocean was frequented by Arab seafarers and traders from the Arab Peninsula and the Persian Gulf as early as the 10th century of the Common Era. They stopped on these islands, in search of water or fresh water and food. And they went through these islands in the Indian Ocean on their way from the East African coast to India. But moreover, in the 14th century, we all know of the famous Arab traveler by the name of Ibn Battuta. He traveled to the Maldives, and he must have also been to the Seychelles or passed through the Seychelles, where I was born and bred. Now, the Seychelles is a small island, all right? It's a small island, and it was first occupied by the French, and then when they came over, there were no one inhabiting on the islands. There are about 96 islands forming the Seychelles, so no one was inhabiting these islands. So they brought slaves from Africa, from East Africa. And if you go to the archives, and you'll see that many of the slaves had Muslim names. But I must be very frank and tell you that none of these African slaves actually left any imprint of Islam in Seychelles. So what happened, and even when the British took over, control and rule the island of Seychelles or the islands of Seychelles, then even when they came over, they brought in Muslims, but as exiles, they were people that were giving them problem in wherever they were ruling. For example, we have in 1960, they exiled the Sultan of Perak. In 1877, they exiled the Sultan of Perak. And then because the Sultan of Perak, when he was exiled in Seychelles, his wife died. And because of that, then he wrote that he wanted to bury his wife according to Islamic rites. And it was from that time, that the British allowed him to use a plot of land, and which eventually became the Muslim cemetery in Seychelles. Until today, it is we are still burying people there in the cemetery. Then we have other people, famous people. For example, in 1922, Salzaglul of Egypt was exiled in Seychelles. But again, when we see all these people, from Zanzibar, the Sultan of Zanzibar and the Sultan of Lahej, the Aden Protectorate, then all of them came. Even the Palestinians were giving them problem in Palestine. They were exiled there. But none of them left an imprint of Islam in Seychelles. But I'm talking about the exiles that will come later on. But in 1963, we had an exile who came from Maldives Island. His name was Ustaz Abdullah Afif Didi. Now he is the one who he and his wife actually managed to spread the knowledge of Islam to the Muslim community. But let me, before we come there, we must say, give credit to the Indian Muslim business people who came from India and settled in Seychelles during the late 19th century. They came over and they came as immigrants from India, and they held on to Islam, and they became very respectable within the community. They were very sincere, very honest. So they were well known to be for their honesty and their sincerity, and they actually kept Islam alive from that time. All right, so they kept Islam. And the British government, when they brought in the exiles, then they used to, for example, my grandfather, Mr. Sulaiman Adam, they had great respect for him, of him. And then he was actually the one that used to be the liaison between the Muslim exiles and the British during the sojourn in Seychelles. So eventually, now we come to, in the 1970s, there were only about 100 Muslims, only about 100 Muslims. So Islam came to be established, and we had people converting to Islam after 1977. After 1977, we had Ustaz Abdullah Afif Didi from the Maldives Islands, who came and helped with the propagation or the teaching of Islam. He and his wife is still alive today. So they helped with that, and it was my Ustaz also. And eventually I went to Pakistan and studied Islam and went to Al-Azhar University. And when I came back in 1977, is there with the help of the Muslims, all the Muslims that were there. We have the three prominent Muslim families of that time, and credit goes to them for having preserved Islam. We have the Auda Musa family, we have the Chaka family, and the Umarji family, Umarji family and the Ali Bai family. So we have all these families who actually preserved Islam, and they gave us full cooperation to teach Islam. And the funding, they provided funding. We established an Islamic center in 1977, and we started praying the Salatul Jummah regularly. Although the Eid of Salah, the Eid of Salah used to be performed long ago when the Muslims were there already. But then the 5 times daily prayer started, and in 1982 we established the first masjid in Seychelles, and today we have 2 masjids on the main island in Seychelles, and we have other facilities for Salah on 2 other islands, namely Prale and Ladig. So this is how Islam came, and then we find that the Muslim community have always been integrated in the community and be part of Seychelles, respected by the governments that were there. Even during the British time, my grandfather served as a member of the Legislative Assembly, and then we have subsequently all the Muslims many Muslims have been employed in the government offices. And then we find that the deputy president of the Seychelles today is the son of Abdullah Afif Didi, and he is the deputy president of Seychelles. And then I'm also serving as the honorary consul of Seychelles in Durban, South Africa. So we are visible. There is a harmony in Seychelles. We have complete freedom of religion in Seychelles, and we can practice Islam. We even have holidays. The Muslims have holidays during the festive seasons, and then we have in Ramadan we have gatherings in Ramadan for the Tarawih Salah, and on Eid, and we have the Eid Salah openly in open air. So the Muslims are visible in Seychelles, and we are growing. So from about 100 people in the 1970s to today, we must be over 3,000 Muslim. But again, you must take into consideration that the total population is only about 98,000. but we have a lot of immigrants who came over, not immigrants per se, but they came over we have the Bengalis who are there, and in the construction companies, we have the Malaysians and also the Indians who are there. So then what happened is that they actually make Islam visible in Seychelles. So when we have the Salah on Eid Day, we see that there are a lot of Muslims there. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having assisted us to Muslims to make ourselves visible in Seychelles and for preserving Islam in Seychelles. That's all I want to say, and shukran again to the sponsors for having sponsored this webinar. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdul Fadl, for sharing the experiences of how Muslim community in Seychelles have grown exponentially and contributed towards the building religious harmony and racial harmony among the migrants and the local community. With that, let me call upon the next speaker, and he is Dr. Professor Wan Lei. He is the director of the Institute of Silk Road Studies in Guangdong Science College, China. Dr. Wan Lei, please. Sorry, Prof. Wan Lei, we are not hearing your voice. Professor Wan Lei, can you hear us? I believe that most of us here cannot hear you at the moment. We can hear background sound, but not your voice.
He's from the Chinese coastal cities. We're in the So before the 7th century, according to my research, the American pioneers very close to the coastal line of the Asian nation until one could reach this part, the narrowest place in northern South Thailand today. And from here, transfer land route and then continue the trip. But after the 7th century, there was a turning point, and
Hello, Professor Wan Lei. Just now we can hear your voice, but there is a strong echo to it. Right now we cannot hear anything anymore. So can you try and adjust again your audio? If the problem continues, we can give you a moment for you to try and settle the audio, while maybe we can call the next speaker to speak first. Do let me know if that is possible.
Yes, please ask the next speaker.
Okay, all right. So hopefully, Professor, your session will be okay after this. So while waiting for that, let me call upon the next speaker. And joining us now is Miss Mariam Saeed Mubarak Al-Burtmani. She is the PhD researcher, recipient of UNESCO Grant for Young Researchers on the Silk Road 2021 from Sultan Qaboos University, Muscat, Oman. Let me remind everyone that Miss Mariam will be presenting in Arabic. And so there is an interpretation service provided in this Zoom session. So if you would like to listen to her speech in English, you can click on the button on the interpretation at the bar below and choose English to listen to a speech in English. Thank you. Miss Mariam, tafaddal.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. هل تسمعوني؟
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
نعم. في البداية أشكر الدكتور. ما المشكلة بالصوت؟ هل تسمعينني دكتورة؟
We can now hear you.
أتوقع لديكم بعض التردد بالصوت، لكن سوف نبدأ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله أجمعين، سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. أوجه شكري وتقديري إلى المجلس العالمي للمجتمعات المسلمة لتوجيههم دعوة بالمشاركة في هذه الندوة الدولية بعنوان المهاجرون المسلمون والمواطنة عبر المحيط الهندي. موضوع ورقتي هي رحلة عبد الله الصحاري العماني إلى الصين، وهي جزء من بحث اليونسكو الحاصل على تمويل من اليونسكو للباحثين الشباب في طريق الحرير. بالنسبة لمحتويات العرض الذي سوف نتحدث عنه اليوم، هو مقدمة عن طريق الحرير البحري بين عمان والصين، وثم نماذج من النقود الصينية التي وجدت في بعض المواقع الأثرية في عمان وخاصة منطقة البليد. ثم سوف نتطرق إلى رحلة عبد الله الصحاري، اسمه والمنطقة التي خرج منها من عمان، والمنطقة والحقبة الزمنية التي استقر بها بالصين، وأهم الأعمال التي أرخت لهذا الرحال العماني من صحار في المصادر الصينية. بالنسبة للطريق البحري، تكونت هذه العلاقات التجارية والتي تعد من أبرز وأهم عوامل ازدهار الحركة الاقتصادية بين البلدان في تلك الفترة التي ربطت بينهما علاقات تجارية. ومن بين هذه الرحلات التي جاءت للمبعوثين التجاريين من عمان لتشجيع التجارة وازدهارها في المنطقة، وخاصة في عهد إسرة صنغ، حيث قدم عدد من التجار العمانيين إلى الصين عن طريق البحر لعدد من الأسباب، منها المتاجرة ونشر الدين الإسلامي، وقد استقروا في الموانئ الصينية. وأيضا من المصادر الإسلامية التي أشارت إلى وجود عدد كبير من العمانيين الذين استقروا في عدد من الموانئ الصينية، سليمان التاجر في كتابه أخبار الصين والهند. أيضا من التجار العمانيين الذي استقروا وتاجروا مع الصين أبو عبيدة عبد الله بن القاسم، الذي ذكرته المصادر العمانية في القرن الثاني الهجري الثامن الميلادي، الذي كان أول رحالة عربي وصل إلى الصين أرخته المصادر العربية. وأيضا عبد الله الصحاري الذي خرج في القرن الحادي عشر الميلادي من صحار ووصل إلى الصين، وهذا ما دونته المصادر العربية والصينية. ولكن تأثرت الحركة التجارية ما بين الصين وبلاد العرب والتجار العمانيين، خاصة بعد قيام ثورة فوان تشو التي أرختها المصادر الإسلامية وخاصة المسعودي حيث أن مدينة كوانشو التي ألحق بها عدد من الخسائر الفادحة أدت إلى تراجع النشاط التجاري في تلك المنطقة. ولكن بدأت التجارة تعيد إلى مجراها، وخاصة في عهد إسرة صنغ التي انفتحت تجاريا وبدأت تنشط علاقاتها التجارية في المنطقة الغربية كما يسميها الصينيون، ومنها منطقة الجزيرة العربية. ومن خلال هذه الخريطة ننظر إلى الطريق البحري الذي وصفه سليمان التاجر في القرن الثالث هجري الميلادي القرن الثالث الهجري التاسع الميلادي، حيث وصف الطريق البحري كما ترون الآن في الشاشة، الذي يبدأ من منطقة بغداد، ثم البصرة، ثم سيراف، ثم يمر إلى السواحل العمانية، ومن ثم يكون ملاصقا لسواحل منطقة باكستان حاليا وشبه الجزيرة الهندية، وثم ينطلق من منطقة كوالملي في الهند وحتى يصل إلى الموانئ الصينية في الجنوب، منها كوانشو وشوانشو وخوانشو ويوانشو، وهي مناطق استقرار كانت في المناطق الجنوبية من الصين. هذه بالنسبة للخريطة الأخرى، هو الطريق البحري الذي وصفه جيدان الصيني الذي انطلق من كوانزو حتى وصل إلى منطقة شبه الجزيرة العربية، وأيضا إلى منطقة أفريقيا وموقع الدولة العباسية في تلك الفترة وخاصة بغداد. وما يدل على وجود العلاقات ما بين عمان والصين في حيث أن هناك مادة أثرية دلت على وجود العلاقات ما بين عمان والصين، وخاصة في عهد أسرة صنغ الجنوبية، حيث زارت الباحثة المتحف المركزي العماني في تاريخ 18 أكتوبر 2022، حيث من خلال هذه الزيارة تبين على احتفاظ المتحف بعدد من النقود الصينية التي وجدت في المناطق الأثرية التي كانت على علاقة بالصين، مثل منطقة صحار ومنطقة البليد ومنطقة قلهات. ونلاحظ من خلال هذه الشاشة أن هذه النقود التي اتسمت باللون الأخضر هي صنعت من مادة النحاس، وكانت في يقال أنها
Ziet
تعود
mij
إلى
niet, toch? Unmuted. Unmuted,
نعم.
ze horen jou nu.
هل الصوت واضح؟ أوكي. حيث بحسب إشارة الدكتور إبراهيم الفضلي أن النقود الصينية جلبت من موقع البليد، وهو موقع في ظفار جنوب عمان، حيث أن هذه السواحل كانت ذات علاقة اقتصادية مع موانئ المحيط الهندي في الهند والصين. وهنالك نص يترجم وجود العلاقة في عهد أسرة صنغ، وأيضا أرخ للرحالة عبد الله الصحاري، حيث من خلال هذا النص الصيني الموجود في متحف البليد في ظفار تم ترجمة هذا النص عن طريق أحد المترجمين. يقال بأنها حكومة أسرة صنغ الجنوبية تشجع وتكافئ التجار العرب الناجحين والمجتهدين، ومنهم التاجر العربي الذي يعود إلى صحار في أصوله واسمه الصيني شين ياو تولو خلال فترة حكمة الإمبراطور شوانزي من 1069 إلى 1077، حيث تم تعيينه من قبل البلاط الإمبراطوري في منصب المشرف العام، وهو منصب رفيع جدا لا يتولاها إلا من يكون له فيه عدد من الامتيازات، حيث أنه كان قائد أو رئيس حي الأجانب في كوانشو. أيضا قاد السفن التجارية البحرية المحملة بالبخور من الجزيرة العربية إلى الصين حيث ميناء شوانشو، وقد كان عملا شاقا ومتعبا بلغت ثروته 3 مليون يوان. مات مقتولا في العام السادس من حكم الإمبراطور 1136. بالنسبة للتفاصيل الخاصة برحلة عبد الله الصحاري على حسب ما وردتنا من المصادر الصينية بعد ترجمتها إلى اللغة العربية، أول شيء بالنسبة لاسمه ومنطقته التي خرج منها من عمان هي صحار. بالنسبة للكتاب الصيني الذي سجل عن عبد الله الصحاري، هو موجز تسجيل الأمور الهامة المختلفة في عهد أسرة صنع، حيث أنه أشار بأن المبعوث لدولة ووشيون وهي صحار التابعة لتاشي وأوداشي وهم العرب، ولكن الباحث الصيني نيوبان وهو باحث صيني قام برسالة ماجستير في العلاقات العمانية الصينية، حيث بعد ترجمة الكلمة الصينية عرف باسم سينيباتر، وهو مبعوث عماني زار الصين في أواخر القرن 11 في فترة صنع، ويورد في المجلد 234 في هذا العام. ومن مملكة ووشون قدمت الجزية، ولكن مملكة داشي ويقال أنه تاشي بالاختلاف في اللفظ الصيني لم تقدماها معا. وسينيباتر وهو مبعوث من مملكة ووشون، ولا نعرف لماذا يطلق على نفسه مبعوثا وهي داشي ووشون، هل هو مبعوث العرب أو فقط مبعوث صحار؟ وكما تعلمون أن صحار كانت في تلك الفترة تابعة للدولة العباسية، فربما يعلق الباحث أن تكون هو مبعوث من صحار عن طريق الدولة العباسية. بالنسبة للمنطقة والحقبة الزمنية التي استقر فيها عبد الله الصحاري بالصين، هي المنطقة على حسب ما وردتنا في المصادر الصينية هي مدينة كوانشو أو مدينة الزيتون، وأن عبد الله كان رئيسا لمنطقة سكن العرب والأجانب الآخرين في المدينة، ولقبه الإمبراطور الصيني سون شين زون بلقب جنرال الأخلاق الطيبة، وقد تم تدوينه على يد سوشي الأديب الصيني السياسي المشهور في مرسوم أصلي لهذا الإمبراطور، ويقال أنه ما يزال يحتفظ بهذه المعلومات في مجموعة الشؤون الخارجية المدونة بالاسم الثاني للسوشي. أما بالنسبة للحقبة الزمنية التي استقر فيها عبد الله، وذلك بالمقارنة مع حكم الإمبراطور الصيني في تلك الفترة، حيث يلاحظ الباحث بأن أشار الباحث سوال وونغ للاسم العربي بقوله أن التاجر الثري من ميزون وهو اسم قديم لصحار خلال فترة الإمبراطور من عام 1068 حتى 1077. ومن الجدير بالذكر أضاف الكاتب وان بارك أن المحكمة عينت تاجرا عربيا يدعى سوان باولو من عمان في منصب حكومي رفيع المستوى. أما بالنسبة لأهم أعمال عبد الله الصحاري الذي قام بها في الصين، كما تعلمون هو كان تاجر ويمتلك ثروة كبيرة، فانتخبه التجار الأجانب أو كان لهم حي خاص فيهم بأن يكون زعيما، وتمت الموافقة على ذلك وعينته المحكمة الصينية زعيما لتلك الفان بسبب قوته الاقتصادية ومكانته بين التجار العرب في مدينة كوانشو. أيضا منح كما سبقنا بجنرال الأخلاق الطيبة جويدي جنرال بسبب مساهمته الكبيرة في خدمة المجتمع. أيضا بسبب أن الأموال التي كانت الطائلة التي كان يملكها عبد الله الصحاري تبرع ببناء يقال أنها أكاديمية ويقال أنها مدرسة، وقام بضاعفة المبلغ عن طريق بيع أرضه، وهذا موثق في الكتب الصينية. أيضا قام ببناء مدرسة للأطفال الراغبين في تكميل دراستهم الأكاديمية، ووثق كتاب تاريخ عهد سلالة صنغ ثراء الشيخ العماني الذي طلب من حكومة الصين ذاك التبرع له لترميم أسوار مدينة غوانشو، ولكن هنالك بعض الأخطاء التي وجدت الباحثة أنها في ترميم أسوار الصين العظيم، ولكن هذا خطأ تاريخي وليس ترميم سور الصين العظيم، إنما ترميم فقط مدينة غوانشو التي كان يسكن فيها عبد الله الصحاري قبل أن يغادرها في عام 1072 عائدا إلى عمان. أيضا قدم له الإمبراطور الصيني قبل رحيله هدايا، وهي عبارة عن حصان وطاقم سرج وزمام الخيل، وهذا دل على قوة العلاقة الودية التي ربطت عبد الله الصحاري بإمبراطور الصين في تلك الفترة. وهذه لوحة جدارية تخيلية تم رسمها استقبال الإمبراطور الصين للوفود العربية ومن ضمنهم وفد عمان بقيادة عبد الله الصحاري. وهذه اللوحة الجدارية توجد في مبنى السفارة العمانية بالصين. وأيضا وامتدادا للعلاقات العمانية الصينية، فقد قامت حكومة عمان على نفقة حضرة صاحب الجلالة السلطان قابوس رحمه الله بتدشين وترميم القاعة المرفقة بمسجد شنغ جنغ في تشوانسو، وهي المدينة التي كان يوجد فيها عبد الله الصحاري. ولكم جزيل الشكر على حسن الاستماع.
Thank you so much, Miss Mariam. It has been very insightful for sharing your research about the connection between Oman and China. And I think part of understanding the world today is to also understand and learn from the past. So what has been achieved in the past, inshallah, can be done again in the present and also in the future. So thank you so much, Ms. Mariam. And with that, let me now move to the next speaker. If I can call upon Dr. Professor Wan Lei, is it possible for you to do the presentation now?
He just informed me he can't because he's extremely yeah. Just move on to the next speaker, please. Yeah.
Okay, noted, Dr. Chai. With that, let me call upon the last speaker for today, which is Professor Dr. KKN Kurup. He is the former Vice Chancellor of the University of Calicut, Kerala, India. Professor Kurup, please.
I'm extremely happy to be associated myself with the Islamic World Council's webinar on Muslim migration to Southeast Asia in historical times and deliver the keynote address. The Muslim diaspora in Southeast Asia, centered from Yemen in historical period, is a major event in world history. Yemen had a multiplied population, and that was why they have migrated to different countries of Southeast Asia. It has made more than 50 nations as Muslim states in the world history, contributing to economic and social developments. In history, this migration is a world event, making a council and cultural matrix and mosaic scenario in the belt of Indian Ocean territories. Indian Ocean territories had been immensely benefited by the Islamic migration and to make a culture pattern. All such migrations had effected by maritime movements. Between Yemen and South Indian, the monsoon wind in May and southwest wind in September made the maritime migration controllable and comfortable and returned home country safely. Although the migration was for resources and missionary work in the oceanic countries, it enhanced a cultural stream based on Islam religion in this country. Islam served as a driving force and nucleus of culture. Although the migration was religious, it promoted a secular culture, tolerance, and sympathy to the cultures of the land and native lands. Kerala is the best example for this generalization. It further helped the depressed castes and classes of the native lands to grow socially, economically, and culturally. And an egalitarian approach was found in all such native states. The Brotherhood of Islam was a tying force which even now one could find existing in these countries. This webinar is a best example to this statement. The maritime trade, which was promoted and subscribed to economic development, such a trade made Calicut an entry port, an international port in Asia for all nations. That was why colonialism entered first to this globalized medieval town, and many wars were fought for this possession of this country. As Tufatul Mujahideen by Sheikh Zainuddin stated, these wars were for the freedom of the Arabian Sea. When Arabian Sea loses its freedom, then naturally India will be a slave country. If this proverbial statement was correct to the extent, the house of Kujali Marakas gave all help to the rulers and the head of Samurins. It resisted the transformation of Malabar into a colony like Goa. In fact, Eurocentric colonialism was resisted by the Muslim migrants and religious communities everywhere. The network of Islamic Council has very responsibility to initiate ideologically a sustained fight against the factors of colonialism. Colonialism is still coming to Southeast Asia as earlier. It has also to study such fights and historical moorings of struggles for resources, culture, and social upliftment. These migrations were unilateral forces for technological transmission of shipbuilding, development of commerce, and technology of maritime war. Unfortunately, it had made certain common diseases transmitted from world contacts to the Southeast Asian countries. It remained culture, its columns, motifs, etc. were imported to native lands of the migrants. It promoted architectural science, native languages, Sufism, and philosophy and a new worldview, philosophy and artistic trends. In fact, economically and culturally and sociologically, the Asian countries were benefited by the Islamic migration. These developments had to be studied properly and monographs had to be published on each native state. The council, the Islamic Council would serve as a pivot for these efforts in future. That will help a new politics embedded in antipathy of colonialism and resource extraction from underdeveloped organic nations. Now underdeveloped nations had been exploited by the developed countries like US and other states. This has to be resisted, and a free trade has to be mobilized among these nations, and the council had to play a seminal role, a crucial role in these developments. Culturally, economically, and sociologically, the council is viable, and it has to be the apex of all social formations of Southeast Asian states. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to address a small lecture on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kurup, for sharing with us how the migrant communities in this region in India and further Southeast Asia has contributed to the development of the communities in these native countries, and also in their participation in fighting against discrimination and injustice for the natives of the land. I am informed that Dr. Chai will be presenting for Dr. Wan Lei. With that, I apologize on behalf of the organizer that our webinar might end slightly late due to the technical issues that we previously observed just now.
Okay, can you hear me? So I'm just going to read the PowerPoint on behalf of Dr. Wan Lei. He cannot do it due to the technical issues from China. In fact, its Zoom is very difficult to access in China nowadays. So apologize from us. We tried many technical ways, but still couldn't work. So I'm just going to, I hope I can present Dr. Wan Lei, lawyer to all of you, for his thought and his great research. His title is Early Muslim Communities in China, the Sino-Arabic Communication during the Tang and Song dynasties. It is old presentation he did a few years in Saudi Arabia. Can I move? Okay, so he talked about three parts. Part one, historical background. Part two, early Muslim communities, and part three, duties of Muslim chief. Then he gave a conclusion. So he gave a historical background of Silk Road connecting Arab world to China across land and also across the ocean. As you see, he already pointed from the trade route between two dynasties, Abbasid Caliphate in Arab Peninsula and Middle East, and the Tang dynasty in East Asia. Both they are connected through overland trade route and maritime Silk Road during the 8th century and later. And he further gives the detailed maps of the road, Silk Road over the land and through the sea, across the Indian Ocean, of course, between Tang and Song dynasty. Song dynasty is the dynasty after Tang, so another great dynasty in Chinese history. Then he gave a historical background of how these two Arabic empires and the Chinese empire lasted. In Arabic, you have Umayyad Caliphate and Abbasid Caliphate. On Chinese side, you have Tang and Song. I think everybody knows the dates here. And in Chinese, we call the Abbasid or Arabs, or in Muslim empire, Caliphate in the past called Dashi, because he mentioned here. In Dashi, in his Chinese historical book, these Dashis were mentioned many, many times. So Dr. Van Lee's presentation says this meaning Arabic, but coming from Persian word Tazi. Tazi actually is coming from Kyrgyz. You know, Kyrgyz is a Turkish, Persian, I think not Turkish, Persian ethnicity group in Central Asia. Today's the ancestors of today's country called Kyrgyzstan. So because I think in Chinese history they mistaken, or they thought Muslims, you know, Kyrgyz, Persians, Arab, they all are Muslims. That's why they call Muslim Dashi, means Kyrgyz. So Dashi is a collective term covering many khanates, kingdoms, and a protectorate, and two important countries under the name of Dashi in Chinese document called Khawazmi and Persia, which is both called using this term. And this communication period during this early Muslim communities from mid-7th century to the end of the Song dynasty, when Song dynasty was conquered by Mongols, which is the 11th century. So this period is from 7th century, mid-7th century until early 12th century, about 500 years. There's a Muslim migrants flowed from Arabia across Indian Ocean, across Central Asia to China. And then he mentioned the earliest record in Chinese historical books. So in the Yichong, this is like this is just like names of the emperors during the Tang dynasty. And there mentioned Dashi Guo, the Arabia, start to dispatch its envoy to pay tribute to Tang court. And then he cites this two record, Old Book of the Tang and Archival Palace as a great tortoise oracle. These are old historical official Chinese court documents which document every visit and communication between China and others. Then there's official visits during the Tang dynasty, both from Umayyad and Abbasid time. Dr. Wan Li says there are 16 times in Umayyad period and 19 times during Umayyad time and 16 times during the Abbasid time. And during Song dynasty, it was 49 times official visit. So he gave an example of Chang'an, which is today's Xi'an in China, which was also the capital of a Tang dynasty and the center of the world during that time when China was at the peak of its civilization. In Tang dynasty, in Chang'an, the city, there's two district or two places. One is called Xishi, means Western district. The other one is Dongshi, means East district. So the Western district, you have full of Muslims and foreigners were living in this capital. And then Dr. Wan Li mentioned, the pictures of this from Chang'an. I think the famous archaeological discoveries. And the other pictures talking about this Kaifeng is the capital of Song dynasty, a dynasty after Tang. Again, from this, he believed that there's evidence to suggest a lot of Muslim immigrants living down here. And he also gave another example of Guangzhou, which is the city in the southern China. I think our colleague, Dr. Mariam, she also mentioned in her presentation, Guangzhou as a trade city. I think until today it is. There are persons fully acquainted with the affairs of China who assures us that besides the Chinese who were massacred upon his occasion, there perished in hundreds of 20,000 Muhammadans, Jews, Christians, and Parsis who were there on account of traffic. So there was a rebellion happening 879 CE. This Chinese rebellion, he killed many government officials and many Chinese. But during the same rebellion, killed many Muslims, Jews, Christians, and Parsis, which means this city already is settled down and lived by many Muslims during this time. And So they suffered a lot together with Chinese during this period of time. So it is Guangzhou. If you go to Guangzhou today, I'm sure some of you might already visit. So these are the two mosques you can see. One is called Huaishen, so remembrance of the Prophet's Mosque. This is like the first mosque built in China. And he has more pictures of this picture is in Quanzhou, which is another port in Fujian province, Masjid of Al-Ashab in Quanzhou. This have 2,500 square meters. And then this is Quanzhou in today, and they still preserved very well today. Okay, I'm going to explain this part, then we'll be done. So why are Sino-Arabic commerce so prosperous during this time? One, the two empires were huge in territory, rich in resources and products, and are powerful in politics and military forces. Both were confident and were open up toward the outside world. Number two, the two empires became neighbors due to their expansions in the same region, the Central Asia. And since then, they became more and more familiar with each other. Third, the traditional Silk Road had been an economic resource for Tang. Since the Song onward, Chinese economic weight gradually moved to South China due to climate and political reasons. Hence, the maritime Silk Road was developed, while Arabic Empire remained an intermediary and beneficiary between East and Europe. So with this, he moved on to the early Muslim communities in China, basically the established communities. The Chinese historical document used Hu to designate alien people, who originally referred to a minority in the Mongol plateau, but later came to refer to any alien people. During the Tang Dynasty, Muslims and other races were called with such a word. To give a few examples, Hu Ke means alien guest or alien person. Hu Shang or Hu means alien businessman or business alien people. Hu, business alien people. These are all names given by the ancient Chinese to Muslims, immigrants. The original meaning of the word Fan in the Zhou Dynasty was also to refer to the alien people during Song Dynasty. And there's another name for Muslims. The emperor ordered that Fan Shang means alien merchants should not be permitted to bring their Chinese concubines back to their native countries. So it was just an example he gave to refer to the Muslim immigrants. And there's more. I think this will not repeat. I'll skip this part. Basically, I think the conclusion he's trying to say is there's all kinds of names Chinese government used to call early Muslims. So in China today, the Hui people are called them community as Fan, which is usually a comparatively independent neighborhood surrounding the mosques, as it may be village in countryside or street or district in a city. Of course, the word Fan meaning alien people has been dropped. They just means Fang. They don't use Fan. So just because Fan sometimes in Chinese means alien is not part of it. Okay. So lastly, he talked about a chief. There's a name for Muslim chief, the head. Whether you call imam in Chinese or in Arabic, but in Chinese there's a name called Shi Ziguo. Yeah. So that's they use Fan Zhang as a master of the Muslim affairs. I'll just read his points here. The Fan Zhang is the master. He should register goods at the city shipping office and should pay the tax of the goods. Rare birds and beasts are prohibited for transportation. Once he cheated the officials, he would be jailed. As the ships come by sea, they breed white pigeons for sending messengers. Once the ships sink, the white pigeons may send message to the people on land. So this just he's citing the Li Zhao, one of the Chinese official documents calling the Muslim chief. So with this, I'll conclude Mr. Wan's presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chai, for presenting for our presenter and our speaker. With that, we have come to the end of our webinar. It has been great listening to the sharing of each presenter. I will now call upon Dr. Abbas Panakal, the researcher with the organizer, to give the concluding remarks. Dr. Abbas, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's remarkable to hear the speakers from the various coastal line of Indian Ocean, especially from South Africa till Australia. As we know, the natural current of monsoon wind were favorable for seamless travel in Indian Ocean and beyond. When we look into the history, most of them were talking about maybe the recent history that during the British, and we heard from Chinese and also the other researchers, the old histories. But what we can see when we look into the earlier documents, there are some other documents called Kisa Sakabati format. It's a British Library document. It is saying that in before Hijrah, Muslims were coming to Indian Ocean, and they had a audience with king in India, that means in Malabar. So this document is describing all the history that king traveled to Makkah, and on the way back, these migrant Muslims were coming with them, and they established 10 mosques in one place, another one mosque near to that, that's 10 mosques in Malabar, one in the Coromandel coast. There are a lot of other things, because they were not just migrating or just not coming, and they were contributing to the trade, they were contributing to the community, they appointed judges, they appointed the port masters, Shah Bandhos, and they supported the king. And later they even called the king as the Amir. They never tried to make this as a land of Muslims, or this is a Darul Islam. They find it as Darul Islam, and they call the king Amir of Muslims, though the king was a Hindu Muslims. And they accepted even the land, donations, and the land donations for building their mosque. And it was the Waqf land. It was from the Hindu king. They built the mosque over there in those times. So even later we can hear that Ibn Battuta, the stories we heard from the speakers, and we heard the story of Zheng Ho. He also made a 7 journey from China till African coast. So when we look into these matters and search the people where they were, so we cannot sometimes identify the people because they're really integrated and they became the part of the community. Now it's very difficult to trace out the people who traveled with Zheng Ho in Malabar coast. He was coming in around 250 ships with 30,000 people. And it is described that there was another nation in the sea, and they stayed there 3 months to get a favorable current wind of monsoon. But they settled there. There were China Mosque and Chinatown, but Chinese are not identified this time in these localities because they integrated very much with the communities. So I believe that we can only identify the people who traveled with British indentured laborers and also maybe half slaves, and hope that they are also, we can see that in Fiji and Malaysia and also other part of the world, they are still integrating with the community, and it is not easy to identify those cultures there. It's part of integration and indigenization. And I also really thank all the people and hope that the World Muslim Communities Council will have the in-person seminars and researchers in this case, and to have more discussion on these matters. And I really thank all the speakers, especially Halima Dawood, the minister from Malawi, and also our chairman, His Excellency Dr. Ali Rashid Al Noaimi, for giving an opportunity to host these people here. I hope that we will have better opportunities to speak, and Maulana Ibrahim Bam for joining, and also Dr. Rosina Muhammad Rasi for her wonderful presentation, and also Dr. Abu Fadil, and also Professor Wan, so because of technical issue, he could not, but Dr. Chai has made it wonderfully, and Miss Mariam Said and Keken Kurup, and Lina has made it wonderful, moderating it successfully. Thank you, all of you, and I really share the regards from the council to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abbas, for the great concluding remarks. I will not hold everyone's back anymore. But before we close the session, can we call upon everyone to switch on their cameras so that we can have a group photo? Oh, okay. All right. I think those who of you who have already switched on are the only available ones for now. So let us give our best smile. 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. Alhamdulillah. Okay, with that, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation, for listening. And those of you who are listening on our social media platform, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, please look out for the future webinars that will be organized by the World Muslim Communities Council. So this is me, Lina Sakina Salim, signing out. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala.